Hi, you guys. Welcome back to Becoming Better Daily, where we're becoming better mentally, physically, and spiritually. Now, I have another good message for you. This is going to be powerful, and I want you guys to just stay to the end, okay? And the title of today's message is God is Making You the Leader. Okay, now before I get into this message, I do want to say to everybody watching this that it's important that we keep our heart right, and then also that we understand there's going to be challenges that come along. Just because God makes you the leader in your family, in your friend group, in your community, it doesn't mean that it's a place where God puts you on a high stool where you get to look down on others. In fact, it's a call to humility. In fact, it's a call to keeping your heart in the right posture, forgiveness, and having a lowness about yourself. And when I say that, I mean not seeing yourself as grand or better than anybody else. And so yes, God is going to make us the leader, but even Jesus, the best leader of them all, said that he came as a servant. So that's what we are to do too. Now that I said that, I want to talk about Joseph because this is a powerful story, and this is what God has been just really talking to me about. And this is one of the first Bible stories that I learned as a little kid. So when I was about in the 5th grade, my school put on a play, and the play was Joseph in the coat. And so this story has stayed with me my whole life, and I feel like God shared that with me at a young age. And I didn't know that it was going to be a forever theme in my life, right? And so let's get the background of who Joseph was in the Bible before we even get to this. So Joseph had a bunch of brothers. I forgot to look up how many brothers, but he had a group of brothers, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 of them, right? And so Joseph's mom, which was, I believe her name, Rachel, couldn't bear any kids. And so the reason that Joseph was so honored, the reason why Joseph got gifted with the coat and he was the pick was because his mom couldn't have kids. And then out of all the other kids that Jacob, his father, had, Joseph was the one that Rachel was able to have. And so you could see how even the way that Joseph came into play and how he was born in life was God's hand on it. Not saying that God's hand wasn't on the rest of the siblings, because absolutely was, and God had a calling for them too. But you could see how God did a miracle to bring Joseph into the world, okay? His very existence. And so he was favored by his dad. His dad gave him this rainbow coat. So you could imagine his siblings watching the favoritism that's happening over his life. And so what happened was Joseph started to have dreams, right? And so Joseph had dreams, and he would get excited about these dreams. And I'm sure when I think about this, that when Joseph was sharing these dreams that God was putting in his heart, Joseph wasn't like, "Oh, I'm about to doodle on y'all." He wasn't probably saying it in a way where he was trying to look down on his siblings, but it's a natural thing that happens, right? Humans have emotions. And so what happened was Joseph had a dream. I think he had 2 dreams, but one was that they were in the field and all of his brothers, wheat or whatever it was, bowed down to his. And so that was the first symbol. And that was the one gift that God gave him, was the interpretation of dreams, which we look at throughout it. But when they saw that, they got so upset that they're like, like, who's this guy, right? They already don't like that he has this coat. He's already his dad's favorite kid. They can see the honor, the glory on his life, but now he's having dreams. And so he's sharing these dreams with his siblings. And what's going on is that his siblings are having this reaction of jealousy, right? And so sometimes what God started talking to me about was sometimes we could get excited about what God reveals to us or what God is going to do in our life, but others, in this case, his family, internalize it as jealousy because they couldn't see past the fact that it wasn't them who was going to be the one to do it, when in fact they never considered that they should celebrate, because that meant that favor was coming to their family. And so really quickly, I want to stop and say this. For example, I don't know if LeBron James or Michael Jordan had siblings, right? But let's say like LeBron James, right? Let's say he had a dream that he was going to become the best basketball player and be known as King James. Like, that is a blessing. But also, when you think about it, if you're a sibling or you're a parent or you're a cousin, the fact that you are in that family means that you are going to reap those same benefits. But they didn't see it that way, because all they could see was, I'm not going to be LeBron James. I ain't going to be on the starting 5. I ain't going to be on the court. They didn't understand that with Joseph's life changing, their life was going to change too. And so they weren't able to celebrate because they couldn't see it through the right lens. And so I think that, and this is what I was writing down. So this happens in our real life too, when God starts to show us what's going to happen. Sometimes you might want to share with your family, with your friends, with the people around you. You start telling them, oh, God is doing this for me, God is doing that. And their heart changes, or they feel a little standoffish. I've literally had friends that I thought I was just sharing like the positivity of what God was doing. And then they would distance themselves from me and say, hey, I see you doing what you're doing. I'm going to go away. But they didn't understand that by God blessing me, by God doing these things for me, that because they were connected to me, because they were in my life, that they would benefit from these things too. And so, why does God do this? Why does God allow him to, once he shares this, the siblings to kind of reject him? Let me put this one other point in here. Even when Joseph at first, he said this to his siblings. He was just saying the dream that he had about his siblings. But then the other dream revealed that his mom and dad will be bowing down to him too. Now, the reason why that, I really want to go on to this point really quickly. Now, the reason why that's challenging is because even Jesus went through this, right? It's hard for them. It's hard for someone who raised you, who watched you, who was authority over you, who once was a leader of you, become either your counterpart or they go under your leadership. And so imagine Joseph and her parents, they prayed for this kid, but not knowing that the very kid that they birthed was going to be the very kid that was going to feed them, was going to lead them when famine came and struck the land. And so, like I said, it's hard sometimes for people who have once led you to understand or receive being led by you. And so we see this in Jesus's life too. Mary knew, this is what I was like, Lord, this is crazy, but Mary knew that Jesus was not an ordinary kid, okay? Mary had other children after Jesus, but she knew, in fact, that the child she was birthing wasn't normal. Jesus was born she was still a virgin. Jesus was born, and then God came to her and said, I was the one who impregnated you, and you are going to birth the Messiah. So Mary knew from the very beginning what kind of child she was having, but her natural instincts came in constantly, right? And that's natural. So she struggled with the same thing. She struggled with the same thing of understanding that she birthed this mighty child. She did not birth an ordinary child, but she was still stuck in her emotions, her physical emotions, the emotions about her life. And so this is what happens. She's telling Jesus, like, Jesus is at the temple trying to learn, trying to increase in knowledge. And all Mary could do is go into a parent instinct. She's like, why would you leave us? Why would you have us worried like this? And Jesus had to tell her, I'm about my Father's business, right? And so this is what happens. And so I just wanted to highlight those two things, because not only is it hard for people who once raised you or was leaders to you to now go under your leadership, but also sometimes they just get caught in these emotions and they can't see the full picture. And so God is going to make you the leader. God is making leaders out here. But again, that is for God's glory, and that is so we can remain humble. But in these seasons, when God is making you the leader, when you feel like you've been rejected after you shared your dreams, when you feel like you're trying to increase in knowledge, but your parents or the people in your life keep putting these restrictions that they connected to their emotions and not what God called you to do, you have to back up from that. And the thing is I was like, okay, God, why do you do this? God does this for a very specific reason. God does this to draw you closer to him. All right, where God is rooting for you, right? Sometimes when you share these things with people, they have natural human emotions, okay? That's just what it is. But God wants us, when he reveals what he's going to do in our life, the mighty things, he wants us to draw closer to him, come closer to him. There's no jealousy in God. God has enough to pour out for you, your siblings, your mama, your best friend, your cousin, your auntie, your niece, nephew. God has enough to pour out for everybody. So there's no reason why God would be jealous. So he wants you to come to him where you could get excited and share the things with him and write them and journal them and get them out. That's what he wants you to do. And then secondly, so that God can shape the gift and show you how he wants to use it. If we are going to these people and just sharing the gift, yes, it feels good to share the excitement, but at the end of the day, we still got to go back to God to see how do we lead, because we know even when you call to be a leader, a lot of times it does not happen immediately. A lot of times it takes months, weeks, years. Like, honestly, think about David. I just found out David was anointed king around 15 years old. He didn't become king until 30 something years old. We think back to Jesus. Jesus was they knew from the very first day when Jesus was born, they was coming looking for him. They knew he was the Messiah, but he didn't enter into his ministry until 33 years old. So in that time, God is putting him through these things. Joseph, same thing. Joseph was chosen from the very beginning. Joseph had a call on his life, but he had to go through slavery. He had to go through getting kicked out, all of these different things, being sold, all of these different things for years on years before he finally walked into that calling. And so when we are called, it's not just so we could get puffed up. Understand that after the calling, that is when the processing happens, okay? And so in that, we shouldn't be getting caught up in what God called us to do, because we need to be tuned in to how God is going to do it. And a lot of time that is the breaking point. A lot of time that is the molding point, the shaping point. He's going to direct your heart, because by the end of Joseph, going back to him, by the end of Joseph's breaking point, molding point, development, he went through betrayal from his siblings, and he went through going to prison. He went through all of these different things just for years later to full circle for him to get in a position where he had the money and the food and the things that when the famine came, his family ended up coming to him. Now, in that moment, God had to work on his heart, because at the end of the day, after all of that stuff happened, after people talked about him, after they did him wrong, he had to say, it was good. Comment that below. If you still here, right, it was good. You might be in the middle of your process right now where God is just working with you. God is preparing you to be that leader, and people may be doing you wrong. People may be writing you off. Your family might be writing you off. Your friends might be writing you off. The world might be writing you off. Your people at your job might be writing you off. But you know what God said? This is the process to becoming a leader. You got to go through all the hard steps. You got to go through all the rejection. You got to go through all the people talking bad about you. You got to go through being in prison. You got to go through being overlooked. All of those things to finally say it was good and still have the right heart of God. So God is preparing you for leadership. God is going to put you in mighty places. He's going to give you the resources where you can pour out to the people that you love, the people that connected to you, strangers that you haven't even met yet. But you have to be able to go through the process and say it was good. You got to be able to go through the process and understand that you want to share these things with everybody. You want to tell, God is so good. God told me this. God told me He going to give me. God told me He going to move me. God told me He going to give me. God, but you have to resist the temptations of that and understand that. Go to God. Go to God, because God is the best person who can help you to develop that. He shows you a picture, but then you got to understand, learn the little pieces to put together, and understand that once you start putting those pieces together, it's not just that money starts falling out the sky or you start getting put into a bunch of great leaderships. It means that you might be in situations where you lead in small places or things that you don't even think is important until God is done breaking you down, breaking that ego down, because God doesn't need any egotistical leaders to then be able to put you over the people who did you wrong, just so you can have the attitude, it was good for me. So this is my message for today, that God is making you a leader, and embrace the process. Allow God to shift your heart. And I want y'all to say, it was good. I hope this message blesses you guys. Y'all have a good day. I love y'all, and I'm out. Peace.